But I do want to do a little bit more of a full rundown on what the Mets are getting from AJ Minter, because there are a little bit of concerns in regards to his health. When you look at the Mets bullpen and from some of the stuff that they struggled with last year, I would say that the Mets bullpen right now is in Minter condition. I will never stop doing these puns. I apologize. Now, AJ Minter, for those of you who do not know, they did sign AJ Minter to a 2-year, $22 million contract earlier on this week. It has a player option for 2026. He did miss the last 2 months of the regular season due to a left hip inflammation, and he also underwent surgery in his leg as well as his hip. Last year, still had a good year in that limited time where it was shortened in 34.1 innings pitched, a 26.1% K rate, did not walk many, was pretty much at the league average in that regard, a 2.62 earned run average, a 3.31 expected ERA in terms of quality of contact. One thing that is a concern somewhat, that being his fielding independent pitching, which 4.5, was still able to have some decent control and command with the call strike whiff percentage, a little bit over 29%, which is well above average. There were a decent amount of home runs per 9, but again, he only gave up 6 last year, considering the smaller sample size because of the injury. Seems like the stuff has regressed a little bit in velocity as we have talked about with his hip surgery, so hopefully he recovers from that well. He has a four-seam that can touch the high 90s, but it was pretty much sitting 94 to 95 last year. 17 inches of induced vertical break from the left side. We've talked about it. Vertical approach angle, want that hovering around 4, less than 5 is a good overall fastball shape. From his overall command last stream where they did sign him, it was a little bit rough for him, but he was still able to manage contact well from the 98th percentile in hard hit rate. Still was able to get good swings and misses, able to expand the zone in that regard, but a little bit miss of location definitely brought down the effectiveness of his stuff, and a little bit lack of velocity. From the left side, it seems like he can pitch to left-handed hitters and right-handed hitters. He pitched better to right-handed hitters last year. They slashed 184, 287, 316. He was also with his secondary stuff. It seemed like that was what he was able to contact manage better with. 259 expected weighted on base average quality of contact, and a 34% whiff rate against his cutter, as well as a 215 expected weighted on base average, plus a 38.6% whiff rate against his changeup. So overall, the secondary stuff is really good, something that the Mets really, really need desperately. Guys who can expand the zone and do not walk batters, something that really fixes in to a guy like AJ Minter. So it is a really, really good add. Recently, I would say that this is a really good pickup. We've talked about it many, many times. I will give a little bit more information in regards to his surgery on the next go around. Again, I think that this also opens up a possibility as to where maybe add a little bit more depth as to not going after that Tanner Scott level type of guy that went to the Dodgers, obviously. But 4-year deal is a 4-year deal to a reliever, and we already have one of those on a long-term contract.
It stinks that, like, even though Scott got a 4-year deal, the fact that it's from the Dodgers, like one of the main teams that you're competing with, the team that eliminated you last year, that they get even stronger. But one of the other things with Minter that we didn't talk about on the stream is that he does have very good career numbers, particularly against Bryce Harper, and I'm pretty sure with Schwarber as well. So that is something nice to have, is that, you know, if you want to use the lefty, you have to think about like what lefties you're going to be facing the most. So the fact that he has experience against them and good experience, I definitely think is another bonus in addition to all the good things that we've talked about with Minter. But like we talked about, seeing what Scott got, I mean, the Minter deal definitely looks really solid. The fact that he could opt out, and like we were saying, just Stearns being flexible with the moves that he's made. Like, he has these outs and these other options, you know, based off of the signings that he's done.
Andrew, you were not here for that stream. Your thoughts on AJ Minter? You didn't get to give your full rundown, but I think that the Mets bullpen got better with this addition.
Yeah, I mean, again, when you have the pitching genius that is David Stearns, as well as the greatest pitching coach of all time in Jeremy Hefner, you know, you got a guy who, yes, on coming off an injury and had hip injuries, velocity was down from the year previous, or his normal career about 95. He's down at like 94. Again, if we want to dumb it down to how we always have to dumb it down, he's got a lot of red baseball savant good baseball savant page, good ERA, hurts the Braves. Like, what's and the value? I get everyone is losing their minds because, oh, again, Stearns going cheap. God forbid you only give 2 years to Minter. You couldn't just give 2 extra years to freaking Tanner Scott and give him an extra $70 million, which is dodging for half of it. I mean, it's the right move. Again, he's 31. It's a reliever. You don't want to get crazy with term. Look at Billy Epler. Thanks for studying Edwin Diaz for half a decade. And he's not a strict lefty that, like, again, the Loogie where he only is good against lefties. He had last year good numbers against righties too. So he's a guy that you can put in high leverage who can get both guys out. Like I said, Frankie has good numbers against Harper and Schwarber. Again, you're going to have to beat those guys, not just in the regular season, but, you're going to see them again in the postseason, weakening the Braves. And again, here's the fact that you think if you got a good player, when Braves fans were literally in the mentions of the past and tweet crying. And, Braves content creators being like, it's a bad deal. So, you got a good pitcher. Is it melted in my mind the first thing I saw when the notification comes up? Hey, look, it's Brandon Nimmo's bitch, because I keep thinking of that Mother's Day pinch hit walk-off homer. Yes. Is that what's going to be in my head when we sign AJ Minter? And will that forever be? Yes. But again, you're getting a solid pitcher.
Maybe he wanted to be a Met all along.
Exactly. Throwing on Mother's Day with the pink bats. But again, we know with this pitching lab, you get him in here, maybe get his velocity back up to 96. And again, it's a high leverage arm. I hope there's another. And the fact they didn't sign, Tanner Scott to close to $17-20 million, maybe there is still another $7 to $8 million reliever. Figure that out, but it still at least gives Stearns a little bit of flexibility to maybe get another. Not necessarily you have to pencil in as a high leverage arm, but again, kind of the static level, or maybe a little bit better to add one more arm to the bullpen.
Maybe it's catching lightning in a bottle, but it's also a guy who has the experience as to where he has built up a decent career. It's not that big of a risk as compared to somebody like Tanner Scott, who, capitalizing on that big year that he did have, I understand the hesitation after seeing the events that happened with Edwin Diaz. As much as I love Edwin Diaz, it's been a roller coaster since he signed that contract. Now, do I think that somebody like Tanner Scott would end up tearing up his knee during the World Baseball Classic? No, but it also just tells you the finickiness of relievers and how you can't commit to that. Not everybody is Mariano Rivera. Not everyone is Trevor Hoffman. Not everyone is Billy Wagner, who most likely will be in the Hall of Fame tomorrow, which he does deserve in regards to his overall health, because we did see a little bit of a decline in his velocity, even though his secondary stuff was definitely effective. He was able to get chases, something that the Mets do need in that bullpen. Shout out to Wexler Rules, who is one of my favorite accounts on Twitter. Great guy. Shout out to him. He did a little bit of digging about Minter's surgery that he had during the offseason, and it said it will be determined if he returns this offseason for the Braves. Obviously, he didn't sign with the Mets. He is recovering from a surgical procedure performed by Dr. Thomas Bird in Nashville. Bird found a labrum tear, a hip impingement, and a lesion, which is not lettuce, a lesion on Minter's femur, and the surgical procedure required performing a microfracture on his hip. Minter obviously dealt with some hip and lower back discomfort throughout the past few years. Maybe it's similar to what David Peterson dealt with. I'm not sure, but not to the extent that he did this season, last season in 2024. They said his average four-seam velocity dropped from 96.6 miles an hour to 95.8 miles an hour in 2023 to 94.5 miles an hour this year. The average dropped all the way down to 93.5 miles an hour during the 5 August appearances he made before having to opt for that surgery. So he is coming off of it, and hopefully there is something that is repaired there. Again, still injured the way that he was. He still put out a quality year. Again, the stability of his health is definitely going to be the main focus of this. And I do believe that if he is healthy, he's going to be a quality part of this bullpen. And hopefully he can be maybe either the 7th inning guy or the 8th inning guy to get the bridge to Edwin Diaz, as to where it was tough to get those guys out there to get the bridge to Edwin Diaz last year, considering the key injuries they had to Brooks Raley and the key injury that they had to Danel Nunez in the middle of the season.